d'état that brought him to power as first consul, giving him near complete control of the French state. For over 10 years, France had been convulsed with revolution and war. Now that Napoleon was leader, his most pressing need was peace, to give the country time to recoup and himself time to consolidate his power. But peace would not come easily. France had a bitter enemy in Austria, which had put 2 large armies in the field ready to move against Napoleon, one to the east of the Rhine and the other in northern Italy, under General Michael Melas. The Austrians were clearly planning a major campaign. Waiting was too dangerous. Napoleon had to seize the initiative. He had to defeat at least one of these armies if he were to force Austria to negotiate peace on his terms. The one trump card he had was that several months earlier, a French army had gained control of Switzerland. There were also French troops in northern Italy, which Napoleon had taken from the Austrians several years earlier. To plan for the first real campaign under his direction, Napoleon holed himself up in his office for several days. His secretary, Louis de Bourrienne, would recall seeing him lying on giant maps of Germany, Switzerland, and Italy laid out wall to wall on the floor. The desks were piled high with reconnaissance reports. On hundreds of note cards organized into boxes, Napoleon had calculated the Austrians' reactions to the feints he was planning. Muttering to himself on the floor, he mulled over every permutation of attack and counterattack. By the end of March 1800, Napoleon had emerged from his office with a plan for a campaign in northern Italy that went far beyond anything his lieutenants had ever seen before. In the middle of April, a French army under General Jean Moreau would cross the Rhine and push the Eastern Austrian army back into Bavaria. Then Napoleon would lead a 50,000-man force, already in place in Switzerland, into northern Italy through several different passes in the Alps. Moreau would then release one of his divisions to move south and follow Napoleon into Italy. Moreau's initial move into Bavaria and the subsequent scattered dispatch of divisions into Italy would confuse the Austrians as to Napoleon's intentions. And if the Austrian army at the Rhine was pushed east, it would be too distant to support the Austrian army in northern Italy. Once across the Alps, Napoleon would concentrate his forces and link up with the divisions under General André Masséna, already stationed in northern Italy. He would then move much of his army to the town of Stradella, cutting off communications between Melas in northern Italy and command headquarters in Austria. With Melas's troops now isolated and the mobile French army within reach of them, Napoleon would have many excellent options for dislocating and destroying them. At one point, as he described this plan to Bourrienne, Napoleon lay down on the giant map on his floor and stuck a pin next to the town of Marengo, in the center of the Italian theater of war. "I will fight him here," he said. A few weeks later, as Napoleon began to position his armies, he received some troubling news. Melas had beaten him to the punch by attacking Masséna's army in northern Italy. Masséna was forced back to Genoa, where the Austrians quickly surrounded him. The danger here was great. If Masséna surrendered, the Austrians could sweep into southern France. Also, Napoleon had been counting on Masséna's army to help him beat Melas. Yet he took the news with surprising calm and simply made some adjustments. He transferred more men to Switzerland and sent word to Masséna that he must do whatever he could to hold out for at least 8 weeks, keeping Melas busy while Napoleon moved into Italy. Within a week, there was more irritating news. After Moreau had begun the campaign to push the Austrians back from the Rhine, he refused to transfer the division that Napoleon had counted on for Italy, claiming he could not spare it. Instead, he sent a smaller, less experienced division. The French army in Switzerland had already begun the dangerous crossings through the Alps. Napoleon had no choice but to take what Moreau gave him. By May 24th, Napoleon had brought his army safely into Italy. Absorbed with the siege at Genoa, Melas ignored reports of French movements to the north. Next, Napoleon advanced to Milan, close to Stradella, where he cut Austrian communications as planned. Now, like a cat stealing up on its prey, he could wait for Melas to notice the trap he was in and try to fight his way out of it near Milan. On June 8th, however, once again, more bad news reached Napoleon. 2 weeks before he had hoped, Masséna had surrendered. Napoleon now had fewer men to work with, and Melas had won a strong base in Genoa. Since its inception, the campaign had been plagued with mistakes and unforeseen events. The Austrians attacking early, Masséna retreating into a trap at Genoa, Moreau disobeying orders, and now Masséna's surrender. Yet while Napoleon's lieutenants feared the worst, Napoleon himself not only stayed cool, he seemed oddly excited by these sudden twists of fortune. Somehow, he could discern opportunities in them that were invisible to everyone else. And with the loss of Genoa, he sensed the greatest opportunity of all. He quickly altered his plan. Instead of waiting at Milan for Melas to come to him, he suddenly cast his divisions in a wide net to the west. Watching his prey closely, Napoleon sensed that Melas was mesmerized by the movements of the French divisions. A fatal hesitation. Napoleon moved one division west to Marengo, close to the Austrians at Genoa, almost baiting them to attack. Suddenly, on the morning of June 14th, they took the bait, and in surprising force. This time it was Napoleon who had erred. He had not expected the Austrian attack for several days, and his divisions were scattered too widely to support him. The Austrians at Marengo outnumbered him 2-1. He dispatched urgent messages in all directions for reinforcement, then settled into battle, hoping to make his small forces hold ground until they came. The hours went by with no sign of aid. Napoleon's lines grew weaker, and at 3 p.m, the Austrians finally broke through, forcing the French to retreat. This was the ultimate downturn in the campaign, and it was yet again Napoleon's moment to shine. He seemed encouraged by the way the retreat was going, the French scattering and the Austrians pursuing them without discipline or cohesion. Riding among the men who had retreated the farthest, he rallied them and prepared them to counterattack, promising them that reinforcements would arrive within minutes. And he was right. Now French divisions were coming in from all directions. The Austrians, meanwhile, had let their ranks fall into disorder, and stunned to find themselves facing new forces in this condition, they halted and then gave ground to a quickly organized French counterattack. By 9 p.m, the French had routed them. Just as Napoleon had predicted with his pin on the map, he met and defeated the enemy at Marengo. A few months later, a treaty was signed that gave France the peace it so desperately needed, a peace that was to last nearly 4 years. Interpretation. Napoleon's victory at Marengo might seem to have depended on a fair amount of luck and intuition, but that is not at all the case. Napoleon believed that a superior strategist could create his own luck, through calculation, careful planning, and staying open to change in a dynamic situation. Instead of letting bad fortune face him down, Napoleon incorporated it into his plans. When he learned that Masséna had been forced back to Genoa, he saw that the fight for the city would lock Melas into a static position, giving Napoleon time to move his men into place. When Moreau sent him a smaller division, Napoleon sent it through the Alps by a narrower, more obscure route, throwing more sand in the eyes of